that lowers cost so that businesses will actually have a desire to hire even more people. And I thank you for the time.
Well, I'd like to ask my colleague the question, because we're talking about a job-killing bill, and just what are we talking about? Are we talking about a couple of jobs? And I had the National Federation of Independent Business. They estimate that mandating that employers provide health care will cost 1.6 million jobs, 1.6 million jobs in our country over the next 4 years, between now and 2013. I mean, we're not talking about a couple of jobs. 1.6 million jobs when our unemployment rate is already 10%. So when I look at this as a job-killing bill, bad for our economy, at a time when the #1 issue that I hear about at home are jobs and the economy, I mean, that's just another fundamental reason to take a look at a bill that at its core is fatally flawed and say, don't do that right now. Our economy can't afford it. The jobless rate in the country, we cannot afford to see that number get worse. So is that...
You know, it's amazing you'd bring that up. It reminds me of if you remember during the General Motors and Chrysler debate, which I know Americans equally paid attention to, there was this discussion about the fact, advocates for government funding talked about the fact that they have to compete against companies in other countries that may not provide health benefits. And if you remember, this whole discussion began around the fact that we wanted to lower costs, lower health care costs, so that our economy would be more productive. And I think all of us said that's exactly what we need to do. So here we end up with a 2,074-page bill that does exactly the opposite. Now, how we got here, it's kind of like you couldn't make this up. That a year ago, here we were, a matter of fact, almost this exact time, having another historic vote, okay, around this whole issue of what might happen with these automotive companies, and the big driving issue being, well, you know, we can't be competitive because we have costs that they don't, and all of us saying healthcare costs do make our country less competitive. So here we have a bill that's going to take us in exactly the opposite direction. This is why so many people in our country have lost, rightfully so, faith in our ability to solve problems.
Senator from Tennessee, as we mentioned earlier, has met a payroll. He knows what this is like. He knows how hard it is. These decisions are when it comes to making decisions about whether you're going to hire somebody else and to try and, you know, squeeze those costs down so that you can buy a new piece of equipment. And I think all small businesses are dealing with that. And the senator from Wyoming mentioned the National Federation of Independent Business, which of course is a business organization that represents a lot of small businesses across this country, indicating that the employer mandate would cost about 1.6 million jobs. So the job issue is so absolutely pertinent to this debate. And that's why NFIB and the Chamber of Commerce and every business organization I know of in this country, including farm organizations like the American Farm Bureau Federation, which represents a lot of farmers and ranchers in my state, those are the organizations that speak for these various small businesses around the country. And they've all weighed in, and they've weighed in heavily, in no uncertain terms, that this sets us back. This doesn't move us forward. You talked about getting that cost curve down. And every analysis that's been done, including by, as I said earlier, the referees, the Congressional Budget Office, the actuary at the Center for Medicare Services, all come back to the same conclusion. And I would say to the senator from Alabama, who also, I think, probably has a lot of small businesses in his state, members of the National Federation of Independent Business, the Chamber of Commerce, the Association of Wholesalers, Distributors, National Association of Manufacturers, lots of these organizations that have weighed in. It seems to me, at least, they've looked at this, and they've looked at it carefully, and they've come to the same conclusion. And I'd be interested in what the senator from Alabama might be hearing from the small businesses that he represents with regard to the impact that this would have on jobs.
Well, I think you, Senator Thune, have made the point here about the cost curve, and Senator Corker, you hit it right on the head. There is a need for us to work together to help reduce the cost of health care and not hurt its quality at the same time. This bill does not do that. And Senator Corker, what businesses tell me is that when you make it more expensive to hire a worker, that makes you less able to hire more workers. And if this bill, in effect, is driving up the cost of health care, not to mention the new taxes that are out there, as an economic principle, it does mean we're jeopardizing jobs. Is that, would you agree?
I mean, look, I don't know how. I don't think that could be debated in a real way. I mean, there's no question that when you add these mandates, you add the taxes, you actually drive up one of the major costs around hiring an employee in a firm, and then you add all the government intrusion. I mean, it's just the whole hassle factor of having to meet all the obligations that are laid out in this type of legislation. All those things just cause people to not want to hire folks. And you know, the thing is that it actually affects the most responsible companies most. You know, the way this bill is written, if you're one of those companies that hasn't been providing health benefits, you can just pay a penalty. Just pay a penalty and not cover. But this bill actually doesn't just stymie job creation, it punishes the companies that are the most responsible, smaller companies in our country. So again, y'all said it over and over again, the core of this bill, regardless of all the accoutrements, and maybe we get 3 votes if we do this and we lose 1 vote here. I mean, I'm sure there's some scribe in there that's confused with all the vote counting that's been taking place over the last few weeks. But the fact is that regardless of all these accoutrements, the fact is the core of this bill is detrimental to our country. I certainly appreciate serving with all of you. And I know that all of us would love to see appropriate health care reform. I hope we're going to have the opportunity after this bill is hopefully defeated to be able to do that. And I thank you all for the time and the patience.
I think we have to wrap up here, but I just want to make one point in closing, because the senator from Tennessee, the senator from Wyoming, senator from the leader is here from Kentucky, my state of South Dakota. I think most citizens would expect that if we're going to reform health care, we're going to do something about their cost, which clearly, as has been made very clear, has been pointed out repeatedly here, all the studies say that that doesn't happen. The other thing I would mention is I can't imagine any of our constituents that would say that if you're going to implement public policy, that you would raise taxes in 3 weeks and not start the benefits until 4 or 5 years later. I mean, that just seems to me that the average American out there has got to be saying, okay, that's like me going to the bank and taking out a mortgage, but I can't move into the house for another 4 or 5 years. And in the meantime, I'm going to be making payments. So,
well, Senator, if I could, your point is so good. So many businesses in my state are saying, I wish that I could go to my local banker and use 6 years worth of costs and 10 years worth of revenues to get a loan. They're saying we cannot do that back home. And I think it's that very thing that you've pointed out so eloquently here. It's that very thing, again, that builds the huge amount of distrust. They know it doesn't work. They know it doesn't pass the common sense test in South Dakota and Tennessee. And I think they just continue to, again, to wonder, you can't make this kind of stuff up. Certainly you can't do it back home. Thank you, Senator.
I thank my colleagues from Tennessee and Wyoming and Alabama and Kentucky and Arizona, all of who have been here. And I would say again in closing, and this is the Associated Press, in part to reduce costs, the legislation would delay until January 1, 2014, creation of so-called insurance exchanges in which individuals and small businesses could shop for affordable coverage, all done to disguise the real cost of this, which, as we all are, is being acknowledged now widely by the Democrats as well, that this isn't a $1 trillion bill. This is a $2.5 trillion bill. It is a job killer. It cuts Medicare, raises taxes, and raises premiums for most American people. Mr. President, I yield back our time.